The New Year Honours 1974 appointments in many of the Commonwealth realms of Queen Elizabeth II to various orders and honours to reward and highlight good works by citizens of those countries. They were announced on the 1st of January 1974 to celebrate the year past and mark the beginning of 1974. The recipients of honours are displayed here as they were styled before the new honours. At this time, honours for Australians were still being awarded in the UK honours on the advice of the premiers of Australian states. The Australian honours system began with the 1975 Queen's Birthday Honours. United Kingdom. Life peers Victor Grayson Hardy Feathered C.B.E. lately General Secretary, Trades Union Congress. Sir Dennis Arthur Greenhill, CMGO, BE, lately Permanent Under-Secretary of State, Foreign and Commonwealth Office and Head of the Diplomatic Service. The Right Honourable Sir Burke St John Trent, CBC, VO, lately Secretary of the Cabinet. Privy Councillor James Anthony Stoddart, MP, Minister of State, Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food. Knight Bachelor William Wilkinson Addison, D.L., Chairman of Council, the Magistrates Association. Alexander Sandor Alexander, Chairman, Imperial Foods Limited, for services to the food industry. Ralph Ellis Brooke, C.M.G.O., B.E., President, Association of British Chambers of Commerce, for services to export. John Gilbert Newton Brown, C.B.E., Publisher, Oxford University Press. Thomas Brown, Chairman, a former Northern Ireland Hospitals Authority. Daniel Norman Chester, C.B.E., Warden, Nuffield College, Oxford. Charles John Curran, Director General, British Broadcasting Corporation. Alan Graham Daughtry, C.B.E., TD, Town Clerk, City of Westminster. Nigel Thomas Loveridge Fisher, MC, MP, for Political and Public Services. Herbert Raymond Gower, MP, for Political and Public Services. William Wolfe Harris, O.B.E., for Political and Public Services in London. Charles William Hayward, C.B.E., for charitable services, particularly in relation to the care of the elderly. Arthur Ford Hetherington, D.Sc., Chairman, British Gas Corporation. John Maxwell Hill, C.B.E., D.Sc., Q.P.M., Chief Inspector of Constabulary. Stanley George Hooker, C.B.E.F., R.S. Group Technical Director, Rolls-Royce Limited. Morris George Kendall, F.B.A., for services to the theory of statistics. John Cowdery Kendrew, C.B.E.F., R.S. for services to the Ministry of Defence. Leslie Ernest Laycock, C.B.E., Chairman, Leeds Regional Hospital Board. Jan Alfred Levendo, C.B.E., Chairman, Carrington Vayella Limited, for services to export. Emil Littler, for services to the theatre. Thomas Lodge, Consultant Radiologist, United Sheffield Hospitals. Herbert Reginald Mathis, T.D., lately Deputy Chairman, Courtaulds Limited, for services to patent law. Leonard Francis Neal, C.B.E., Chairman, Commission on Industrial Relations. Charles William Oatley, O.B.E.F., R.S., Emeritus Professor of Electrical Engineering, University of Cambridge. Daniel Eric Arthur Pettit, Chairman, National Freight Corporation. Professor Cyril Henry Phillips, Vice-Chancellor, University of London. Director, School of Oriental and African Studies. Charlie Dennis Pilcher, C.B.E., Chairman, Commission for the New Towns. John Francis Prideaux, O.B.E., Chairman, Board of Governors, St Thomas Hospital, London. Chairman, National Westminster Bank Limited. Professor Hugh Norwood Robson, Vice-Chancellor, University of Sheffield. Frederick Henry Stewart, F.R.S., Regius Professor of Geology, University of Edinburgh. Francis Taylor, founder, chairman and managing director, The Taylor Woodrow Group. James Henderson Waddell, CB, Deputy Under Secretary of State, Home Office. Joseph Meredith Whitaker, TD, D.L., Chairman, Executive Council, County Councils Association of England and Wales. John Leslie Williams, C.B.E., lately Secretary-General, Civil Service National Whitley Council. Harold Mario Mitchell Acton, C.B.E. for services to the British community in Florence and to Anglo-Italian relations. Mr. Justice Darnley Arthur Raymond Alexander, C.B.E., Chief Justice, Southeastern State, Nigeria. The Honourable Mr. Justice Geoffrey Gould Briggs, Chief Justice, Hong Kong. Lawrence Kadoorie, C.B.E. for services to the community in Hong Kong. Australian State of New South Wales James Frederick John Oswald, C.B.E. for services to commerce and the community. The Honourable John Brian Munro Fuller, M.L.C., Minister for Decentralisation and Development. Charles David Griffin, C.B.E. for services to the community. Gregory Blaxland Cater, for services to commerce. State of Victoria Albert Edward Chadwick, C.M.G. M.S.M. of Toorak, for services to the community. Alexander Reid Creswick of Melbourne, for services to horse racing. The Honourable Mr. Justice Urban Gregory Gowans, for services to the law. David Fletcher Jones, O.B.E. of Warrnambool, for services to the decentralisation of industry and to the community. State of Queensland Bernhardt, C.B.E. M.C. of Brisbane, for services to business, the community and the sporting life of Queensland. The Honourable John Alfred Rowe of Ingham, for services to Queensland as a Minister of the Crown and Parliamentarian. Order of the Bath, Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the Bath Admiral Sir Edward Beckworth Ashmore, K. C.B.D. SC Air Chief Marshal Sir Andrew Humphrey, K. C.B.O. B.E. DFCA, FC Royal Air Force. Sir Charles Craig Cunningham, K. C.B. KBE, C.V.O. for Public Services. Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath Vice Admiral Michael Frampton Fell, C.B.D. S.O.D. S.C. Vice Admiral George Francis Allen Truby. Lieutenant General Edwin Nail Westby Bramall O.B.E. M.C. Late Infantry Colonel Commandant 3rd Battalion the Royal Green Jackets. Major General Jack Wentworth Harmon, O.B.E. M.C. Late Royal Armoured Corps. Acting Air Marshal Ruthven Lowry Wade, C.B.D. F.C. Royal Air Force. Michael Bowen Hanley, Attached Ministry of Defence. Nicholas Godfrey Morrison, C.B. Permanent Under Secretary of State, Scottish Office. Anthony Nathaniel Stainton, C.B. First Parliamentary Council. Peter Eustace Thornton, C.B. Second Permanent Secretary, Department of Trade and Industry. Companion of the Order of the Bath, Military Division Rear Admiral Sir Peter Anson, B.T. Rear Admiral Thomas Renison Crudders. Rear Admiral Edward William Ellis, C.B.E. Surgeon Rear Admiral Cyril Lawson Tate McClintock O.B.E. Q.H.S. Rear Admiral Ian George William Robertson, D.Sc. Major General William Bate O.B.E. Late Royal Corps of Transport, Colonel Commandant Royal Corps of Transport, now ARO. Major General Roger Sydenham Marshal, T.D. Army Legal Services Staff, now ARO. Major General Horace Rollo Squarepane, M.C. Late Royal Armoured Corps. Major General James Howden Robertson, F.D.S. Queen's Honorary Dental Surgeon, Late Royal Army Dental Corps. Major General Ronald Macaulay Somerville, O.B.E. Late Royal Regiment of Artillery. Air Vice Marshal Alan Cyril Davies, CBE, Royal Air Force. Air Vice Marshal Eric Plumtree, OBED, FC, Royal Air Force. Air Vice Marshal Rex David Rowe, AFC, Royal Air Force. Civil Division Arthur John Borum, Deputy Secretary, Cabinet Office. Frederick Gordon Burritt, Deputy Secretary, Civil Service Department. David Cardwell, Director, Military Vehicles and Engineering Establishment, Ministry of Defense. Edward Jeffrey Cass, OBE, Deputy Secretary, Ministry of Defense. Basil Broderick Hall, MCTD, Deputy Treasury Solicitor. Douglas Arthur Lovelock, Deputy Secretary, Department of Trade and Industry. Hugh Avant Lowry, Controller and Auditor General for Northern Ireland. Thomas Hamilton Shearer, Deputy Chief Executive, Property Services Agency, Department of the Environment. Henry Alexander Shuin, OBE, National Insurance Commissioner. Arthur Roger Thatcher, Deputy Secretary, Department of Employment. Ryland Lowell Degwell Thomas, Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions. Geoffrey Charles Wardale, Deputy Secretary, Department of the Environment. Robert Windsor, Under-Secretary, Department of Health and Social Security. Philip John Woodfield, CBE, Deputy Secretary, Northern Ireland Office. Robert Little Workman, Under-Secretary, HM Treasury. Order of St. Michael and St. George. Knight Grand Cross of the Order of St. Michael and St. George the Right Honourable George Rowland Stanley, Earl of Cromer, K. CMG, M.B.E. HM Ambassador, Washington. Knight Commander of the Order of St. Michael and St. George Claude James Hayes, C.M.G., Chairman, Crown Agents for Overseas Governments and Administrations. Ernest John Ward Barnes, M.B.E. HM Ambassador, The Hague. Dennis Seward Lasky, C.M.G., C.V.O. HM Ambassador, Vienna. David Albriscott, C.M.G., British High Commissioner, Wellington. Australian State of New South Wales the Honourable John Robert Kerr, C.M.G., Lieutenant Governor and Chief Justice. Companion of the Order of St. Michael and St. George Ian Donald Cameron, OBE, Senior Technical Advisor, Ministry of Defence. Robert Goldsmith, Under-Secretary, Department of Trade and Industry. Air Commodore Norman Walter Kieran, CBE, Chief Executive, British Aircraft Corporation, Saudi Arabia. Walter Plowright, Professor of Veterinary Microbiology and Parasitology, Royal Veterinary College, University of London. John Roland Malcolm Whitehorn, Deputy Director General, Confederation of British Industry. For services to export. Derek Charles Carden, H.M. Ambassador, Sana. Leonard Clifford William Figg, H.M. Consul General, Milan. Ian Albert Clark Kinnear, Deputy Governor, Bermuda. Ian MacDonald Lightbody, Secretary for Housing, Hong Kong. Donald Hardman MacDonald, lately Manager, Banking Department, Bank for International Settlements, BAL. Arthur Frederick Maddox, British Deputy High Commissioner, Ottawa. Peter Harold Reginald Marshall, Assistant Under-Secretary of State, Foreign and Commonwealth Office. John Ernest Powell Jones, H.M. Ambassador, Phnom Penh. Ian Johnston Macbeth Sutherland, lately Consulate, Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Alexander Nielsen Strachan Walker, Consulate, HM Embassy, Washington. Australian States. State of Victoria George Frederick William Brown, lately Chairman of Commissioners, Victorian Railways. John Vincent Dillon, Under-Secretary, Chief Secretary's Department. David Milton Myers, Vice-Chancellor, La Trobe University. State of Queensland Ivor Gray Morris, of Red Bank. For services to industry and the community. Royal Victorian Order. Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order Sir John Wheeler Bennett K. CVO, C. MG, O. BE. Knight Commander of the Royal Victorian Order Arthur George Linfield, C.V.O. C.B.E. Sir Vision Stevenson McAdam, C.V.O. C.B.E. Lieutenant Colonel the Right Honourable Patrick Terence William Span, Baron Plunkett, C.V.O. William Thomas Charles Skymie, C.B.E. T.D. Commander of the Royal Victorian Order William Harry Gabb, M.V.O. Leslie William Green, M.B.E. Major Arthur John Stuart Griffin, M.V.O. Robert Lindsay, M.V.O. B.E.M. Colonel Donald Curtis McKinnon, George Albert Henry Pierce, member of the Royal Victorian Order. At this time the two lowest classes of the Royal Victorian Order were Member and Member, both with post-nominals MVO. Member was renamed Lieutenant from the 1985 New Year Honours onwards. 4th Class Bernard Christian Bryant, M.B.E. Kenneth Grant Chavis, Reginald Joffre Elliott, M.V.O. Commander John Edwin Stroud Raymond, Royal Navy, Michael David Timms, M.V.O. 5th Class James Harper MacDonald, Kenneth William Moss, George Oakes, Ronald William Palmer, Miss Helen Dale Strange, William Hamilton Summers, Ernest Leslie Turnick, M.B.E. Royal Victorian Medal Augustus Lawrence Gordon Belcher, Chief Technician Martin Richard Cockett, Royal Air Force, Chief Marine Engineering Mechanic Frank William Copeland, Victor Fletcher, Chief Petty Officer Stuart Peter William Ford, Yeoman Bedgoer Alfred Stephen Groves, Her Majesty's Bodyguard of the Yeoman of the Guard, Lawrence Hardy, Yeoman Bedgoer Richard Farquharson Hewlett, B.E.M. Her Majesty's Bodyguard of the Yeoman of the Guard, Acting Flight Sergeant Brian George Leach, Royal Air Force Regiment, Alfred May, Arthur Ernest Wakeling, David William Wise, Order of the British Empire, Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the British Empire, the Right Honourable Hartley William, Baron Shawcross Q.C., Chairman, Panel on Takeovers and Mergers. Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire Miss Josephine Barnes, Consultant Obstetrician and Gynecologist, Charing Cross Hospital and Elizabeth Garrett Anderson Hospital. Emma Frances Heather, Mrs. Claude C.B.E. Chairman, Women's Royal Voluntary Service. Australian States State of Victoria Phyllis Erin, Mrs. Frost C.B.E. J.P. of Croydon, for outstanding services to the community. Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire, the Right Honourable John Lawson Ormrod Andrews, D.L., for political and public services in Northern Ireland. Professor Cyril Astley Clark, C.B.E.F., R.S. President, Royal College of Physicians of London. The Right Honourable Lawrence Michael Harvey, Earl of Ross, M.B.E. for services to the arts. Acting Air Marshal Reginald Edward Wynyard Harland, C.B., Royal Air Force. William Weston Greaves, C.B.E. for services to the British community in Argentina. Colonel Hugh Richard Dear Oldman, O.B.E. M.C., lately Defence Secretary, Sultanate of Oman. Order of the Companions of Honour the Right Honourable Henry, Baron Cohen of Birkenhead, for services to medicine. The Right Honourable Angela Olivia, Countess of Limerick, B.E. for services to the International Red Cross. The Right Honourable William Stephen Ian Whitelaw, M.C., D.L., M.P., for political and public services. New Zealand, Order of the Bath, Companion of the Order of the Bath Military Division Air Vice Marshal Douglas Fitzclarence St. George CBEDFCAFC, Chief of Air Staff. Order of St. Michael and St. George Knight Commander of the Order of St. Michael and St. George the Honourable Robert Mafeking McFarlane CMG, for long and valuable services in Parliament and to the City of Christchurch. Companion of the Order of St. Michael and St. George Osmond Hutchinson, of Christchurch. for services to the community. Louise Nathan Ross of Auckland for services to commerce. Kenneth Leslie Sanford, Chairman of the Accident Compensation Commission. Professor Emeritus Frederick Lloyd Whitfield Wood, for services to scholarship and Victoria University, Wellington. Order of the British Empire. Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division the Honourable Albert Royal Henry, Premier of the Cook Islands. William Harold Angus Sharp UPM, Commissioner of Police, New Zealand Police. Military Division Lieutenant General Richard James Holden Webb CBCBE, Chief of Defence Staff, New Zealand Armed Forces. Commander of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division the Reverend Canon Colin Douglas Charles Caswell OBE, of Auckland, lately Director, Selwyn Foundation. A Reverend Canon Charles Elliot Fox MBE, of Waipukurau, for humanitarian services, particularly in the Solomon Islands. James Henderson Mackey, lately Commissioner of Works. Joseph Lavalley McManaman JP, of Auckland, for services to sport and the community. Douglas Augustine Patterson MBE, of Wellington, for services to aviation. Antonio Valley Prendeville, of Dunedin, for services to mining. Haratua Rogers, of Rotorua, for services to Maori Tonga and the community. The Reverend Father Francis Patrick Joseph Wall, of Taranaki, for services to the community. Frederick Miles Warren, of Christchurch, for services to architecture. Military Division Major General Robin Hugh Ferguson Holloway OBE, Deputy Chief of the General Staff. Officer of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division Robert Leslie Archibald, of Wellington, for services to local government. Professor Valentine Jackson Chapman, University of Auckland, for academic and public services. Mervyn Miles Nelson Corner MCJP, of Auckland, for services to the community. Alfred Ginsberg, Veterinary Advisor, New Zealand High Commission in London. Lionel Rexford Hetherington, of Waihi, for services to medicine and the community. John Patrick Kennedy, of Dunedin, for services to journalism. James MacDonald JP, of Lower Hutt, for services to the community. Thomas Bain MacDonald JP, of Hawke's Bay, for services to winemaking. Charles James Leonard Matheson, of Auckland, for services to youth, particularly Boys Town. Edward James Britton Matthews JP, of Raumati South, for services to local government and organisations. Robert Frederick Moody MBE, of Auckland, for services to medicine. Iaru Mokapo, of Kaikoai, for services to the community, particularly to the Maori people. Mrs. Dorothy Edith Simons, of Auckland, for services to youth and sport. Mrs. Amy Victoria Castle Slack, of Auckland, for services to the parent-teacher movement. Joseph Edward Story, of Taupo, for services to local government. Robert Charles Stewart, of Wellington, for services to agriculture and sport. The Reverend Tainapi Tutwehi Wehi Waka, of Hawara, for services to Maori welfare. Military Division Lieutenant Colonel John F. Mace MBE, New Zealand Defence Liaison Staff, New Zealand High Commission, Canberra. Wing Commander Colin Morris Hanson, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Member of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division Miss Kathleen Allison, Bursar, Auckland University. Ivan George Clement Anderson, Mayor of Cromwell. Arthur William Boone, of Auckland, Lieutenant Colonel, Salvation Army. Mrs. Daphne Francis Byrne, of Dunedin, for services to the community. Mark Vincent Comer, of New Plymouth, for services to the community. Charles Armistice Corlett, of Auckland, for services to the community. Mrs. Nina Catherine Dallinger JP, of Cambridge, for services to the community. Harry Delamere Barter Dancy, of Auckland, for services to journalism and the community. Mrs. Irene Lucy Furman JP of Geraldine, for services to the community. Hugh Donald Gillies of Dunedin, for services to life-saving. William Richard Hawkey of Christchurch, for services to music. Raymond Joseph Wadman Jacobs, lately Chief Preparator, Canterbury Museum. Mrs. Rita Mary King of Wellington, for services to women. Eric James Kirk, for services to Wanganui Harbour Board. Ronald James McLean JP of Invercargill, for services to the community. Mrs. Betty Hamilton McPhail of Wellington, for services in the field of social welfare. Ariwera Riini Manuera JP of Whakatane, for services to the Maori people. David Hamilton Mason of Dunedin, for services to sport. Mrs. Kitty Mayona Mildenhall JP of Lower Hutt, for services to the community. Noel Selwyn Murray JP of Auckland, for services to the community. Patrick Joseph O'Regan of Inangahua Junction, for services to local government. Miss Nellie Ina Plunkett of Christchurch, for services to psychiatric nursing. Robert Gordon Robinson of Christchurch, for services to the potato industry. Henry Joseph Rudolph of Wellington, for services to music and welfare. John Charles Trimmer of Wellington, for services to ballet. John Cuthbert Wishart JP of Kayara, Chatham Islands, for public services. Military Division Warrant Marine Engineering Officer Alexander John Kildare, Royal New Zealand Navy. Lieutenant Leonard Anthony Mangos, Royal New Zealand Navy. Major Alan Olaf Bloomfield Dead, Royal New Zealand Infantry Regiment. Warrant Officer First Class Matthew Harawira Edwards, Royal New Zealand Armoured Corps. Warrant Officer Second Class Ronald Clifford Spraggs, Royal Regiment of New Zealand Artillery. Major Melva Beatrice Walker, New Zealand Women's Royal Army Corps. Squadron Leader Peter Raymond Adamson, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Temporary Flight Lieutenant Brian John German, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Companion of the Imperial Service Order Ronald Johnson, Supervisor, Class 3, New Zealand Post Office. British Empire Medal Civil Division Alfred John Hesketh Allen JP of Leven, for services to local government. Daphne May Barkman of Dunedin, for services to the community. Cranley Harper Barton of Christchurch, for his philanthropic services. George Joseph Brady JP of Christchurch, for services to the trade union movement. Lawrence William Brennan JP of Opunaki, for services to the community. Ludlow Ellison Brooker of Wellington, for services to rowing. Miss Beth Isabel Fryer of Oamaru, for services to the community. Daniel Goff of Auckland, for services to the community. Miss Emma Louise Hamill of Kaiapoi, for services to the community. Mrs. Catherine May Jones of Invercargill, for services to music. Mrs. Constance Lois Kerslake of Wainuiomata, for services to the community. Mrs. Eileen Mary Kingston JP of Palmerston North, for services to the community. Basil George Mellor of Hamilton, for services to the community. Mrs. Rangi Mahara Rehana Meat of Foxton, for services to Maori culture. William John Overton of Dunedin, for services to the community. Miss Olive Margaret Rayner of Nelson, for services to the sick. Mrs. Blanche Rhodes of Dunedin, for services to the community. Adam Russell Ross of Bluff, for services to medicine and the community. Miss Ivy Merle Shaw of Hastings, for services to nursing and the community. Leonard Archibald Stewart of Christchurch, for services to rugby league football. Percy Trebilcock of Thames, for services to the community. Patrick Francis Ward of Greytown, for services to the community. Military Division Temporary Warrant Officer Jennifer Claire O'Donnell, Women's Royal New Zealand Naval Service. Staff Sergeant Ernest Matthew Dix, Royal New Zealand Electrical and Mechanical Engineers. Flight Sergeant Leslie Harrison, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Flight Sergeant Edward Ernest Morton, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Flight Sergeant John Francis Walsh, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Royal Red Cross. Member of the Royal Red Cross Matron Arta Tamaki, Royal New Zealand Nursing Corps. Air Force Cross Flight Lieutenant Graham Robert Lloyd, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Queen's Fire Service Medal George Mortimer McGregor, Foreman, Richmond Volunteer Fire Brigade. Eric Merriman Morris, Chief Fire Officer, Balclutha Volunteer Fire Brigade. Lloyd Foster Wilson, Chief Fire Officer, Auckland Metropolitan Fire Brigade. Queen's Police Medal Alan David Knight, Constable, New Zealand Police. James Wilfred Maguire, Chief Inspector, New Zealand Police.